But I always wondered how, as a man, that you can travel through life, you can wake up every day, you can get on with your life, you can laugh, you can go to parties, you can live your best life, knowing that you have a whole human being living in this world. Like, I was working 7 days a week, like as in 7 days a week, every single day, like consecutive, like for months, 7 days a week, like not one day off. I'm very selfish. I live my own life, and people who want to be a part of it need to get with the program. But I've kind of always had that desire to be a voice.
So let's get into it. So Past, Present, Future, episode 39, which sounds crazy. But we are here with Jusnah Gadi.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to get into it because we've had all variation of industry individuals on the podcast, but I would probably class you as a serial entrepreneur, which is a new one. So in true Past, Present, Future style, I do want to go back to the very beginning. And I mentioned to you off camera, I've had the pleasure of reading through a plethora of articles on you, as you're very well documented. So I believe, unless these documents are lying, you have Tanzanian heritage, but you grew up in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to understand what it was like growing up in the Netherlands and why you were there.
Well, so I am Tanzanian. They say Tanzanian heritage, but I don't identify as anything else, though I do have a Dutch nationality. And yeah, I did grow up in Holland. So my parents came over here actually to the UK. I was born in the UK, went to Holland, I guess, when I was an infant, and then grew up there, then came back here when I was about 11, 12, so at the start of sort of like primary school. So I'd already done all of my primary education. I was like a Dutch girl. I still speak Dutch fluently, and it's still such a huge part of who I am. You know, when people, like I always say, even though I've been here in the UK longer than what I was in Holland, I always say I grew up in Holland, because I feel like it was like my primary years. So I felt like a lot of being in Holland shaped me and shaped who I am.
How did it shape you?
Pardon?
How did it shape you?
Just in terms of having had a broader kind of like perspective, and I think more exposure of growing up in different environments, and also having to adapt, to assimilate, because I grew up in environments that were, you know, predominantly white. I was used to being the only black girl, being the only black family in the whole village, and dealing with all the nuances and challenges that come with that.
Yeah, how were you received as the only black girl or the only black family in a predominantly white area?
You know, it had its moments. But then I also feel like I was conditioned to probably, or maybe not as awakened to the things that I wouldn't deem as acceptable now. You know, back then, because conditioned by your environment as that being the norm. And also I grew up in a household with a white stepdad and 5 white stepsisters, which as with more life experience, being older, having a more matured and educated brain, there are things in hindsight that I think were not acceptable, that probably affected me. You know, just different things I feel like as black people that we go through, and not necessarily uniquely if you're in a predominantly white environment, just living in a world that is a white man's world, the things that we go through. But even just experiencing the nuances and like the complexities of an interracial relationship between my mum and between my stepdad, and things that were jokes that shouldn't have been, things that were comments that shouldn't have been accepted, and things that I only realise now. And I mean, it's Holland. Holland is one of those countries, an extremely liberal country. Political correctness is like at the bottom of their agenda. And it's a country that you could almost say has some cultures that are overtly racist, but to such an extent that when you exist in that, you don't see it as unacceptable. We have this thing called Zwarte Piet. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but there's like Sinterklaas, who is like a saint, who comes in November just before Christmas, and it's like another version of Father Christmas. It's called Sinterklaas, and he comes with his helpers, who are called Zwarte Piet, and Zwarte means black, right? And Piet means, it's just the name Piet, but they're all referred to as Zwarte Piet. And it's essentially just a group of white people in blackface till today. And it's something that people are only fighting now, or that only now are people seeing that as something that isn't acceptable, shouldn't be acceptable. And I think in this era of wokeness, in these, I guess we would say, the George Floyd, post George Floyd awakening, that they are starting to open up to the idea that is just plain wrong. And these Zwarte Piet, they come into your primary school. They come they literally do a whole tour of it's exactly like Christmas, just in November, right? They hand out sweets and it's literally just like big white men, predominantly in blackface. And they literally look like gollywogs. So it's crazy, and it's like I said, in an environment where you are kind of it's to such an extent that you're conditioned to accept that. In Holland, you can on primetime TV, it's acceptable to say something like Marokkanen. Marokkanen is like a reference to Moroccan, but I would say that the equivalent to that would be saying the P word for to refer to someone who's from Pakistan. You hear that on primetime TV.
And you said it took you a long time to process some of these things, and at the time you didn't think about them. Now, having processed them, how do you feel about those sorts of things that you were exposed to at such a young age?
I feel that is such a big question, because of course I'm more. Because at the time, certain things may have affected me, but I probably would have suppressed them or accepted as that being the norm, and maybe not always having had the even intelligence to challenge that. You just accept that as being something that is your environment. But one thing that I would say is that I've never really felt like a victim, because I came from a family with really, really strong principles, really, really strong foundation. I had the most phenomenal mum who instilled a really, really strong sense of identity in me. I've always been African. I've always claimed being African. I've always been extremely proud to be African, even when I had to stand alone in a room full of white people who reference African people as being primitive, as being, something that is subhuman. I've always been very confident in standing in that identity, and that all comes down to my upbringing, my environment, and the things that my mum instilled in me. So I never really felt like a victim. There were moments where I might have felt sad by a comment, but more so now, it's just a sense of, I would say, anger. The fact that we have had to endure that kind of trauma, just like as black people traveling through, a Western society, and that isn't, like I said, it doesn't really depend on which part of the Western hemisphere that you're growing up in. Like the black experience is a shared experience, no matter where you are. But yeah.
No, it's a really good answer, and thank you for going into it, as I know it's not an easy topic to discuss, so I appreciate it. You said within that answer, when you were touching upon your family, you made a point of saying stepfather, which just led me to kind of ask, and more out of interest than anything, what was the situation with your actual father?
Absent daddy. I had no daddy around when I was growing up. Unfortunately, it's just a typical story. He just was very absent. He still is absent. You know, inconsistent, hasn't really contributed much to my life. I know who he is. I have spent time with him. But he's really a non-factor in my life. And it's as far as sad as it is to say that, you know, and they do say that, you know, absent fatherhood can manifest itself in different ways. And maybe in adulthood, there are some things that I recognize which I may be able to attribute to that.
Like what?
But I've never felt a void. Maybe my choice in men. I don't know, but I've never really felt the prophecies that all the sociology books will tell you from not having a dad in my life. I think it's because I had such like exceptionally strong women in my family that I've just always just felt empowered. I've always felt complete. I've always felt like I have a really, really strong support system, you know, a strong family network. So I've never really felt a void. I do, like, I pity him. Like, I think that he's pathetic because, you know, I always wonder, like, as a man, how, like, I mean, of course, there are also absentee mothers, right? But it's something that we rarely hear of. And those are like exceptions. But I always wonder how, as a man, that you can travel through life, you can wake up every day, you can get on with your life, you can laugh, you can go to parties, you can live your best life, knowing that you have a whole human being living in this world. You don't know how they're eating, you don't know how they're sleeping, you don't know what challenges they're enduring in life, you don't know what triumphs, you don't know what accomplishments, and you actually just don't give a shit. That to me is astounding. Like, I just cannot fathom like how you exist like that. But
you made a point then of saying that they won't know like what achievements, what things you've accomplished within your life. I was just wondering, as you were saying that, how much more motivation for you to achieve the top bracket achievements does that give you?
I don't think that my motivation comes from the absence of my dad. I think my motivation comes from the sacrifices of my mum. That's really where my motivation comes from, yeah.
That's a good answer. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the tough parts in your life, as I find, specifically on this podcast, what I like to understand is what you've been through. And I think something that's constant with successful people, to be transparent, is that they go through a lot, but they're able to potentially put that into motivation to come out the other side. So I read a quote yesterday, I'll be honest, I'm just going to read it out. So it says, "Don't let the pain of an imperfect past hinder the glory to your fabulous future." So I wanted to ask you, what's kind of the most painful thing you've been through in your past, and how have you managed to come through that out to the other side to obviously achieving what you're achieving today, which is incredible things?
Well, easily by far the passing of my mum is the most like painful thing that I've ever been through. It's like an everlasting pain. It doesn't go. You just exist with it as part of like your DNA now, you know, like as part of like just who you are. And I think that, you know, how you get through it, to be honest, I don't think that I will ever get over it. I will never get over it. But one thing about time is that it teaches you how to cope. You know, time, and you know, they say that time heals. It doesn't. Time just teaches you how to cope, because I think that until you have experienced that, it's something that I just can't explain, especially when it happens. So, because my mum literally just afternoon she's here. I mean, morning she's here, afternoon she was gone. She was not sick, she was not ill, it was just sudden. And it happened at such a, I think, crucial point in my life. Transitioning from like a teenager into this young woman, but at the same time I am grateful. I think that some of the things that comfort me is that I do try and see, I know it sounds really cliche, but I also try and see the blessings in that, which is like sometimes I remind myself, yes, I lost my mum very suddenly. I lost my mum at 24, at a very young age, premature age. She didn't see my children. She didn't see me get married. But then at the same time, I didn't have to watch my mum sick. I didn't have to watch my mum lose her ability to walk, her ability to feed herself, her ability to... Do you get what I mean? So it's like, I didn't have to watch my mum deteriorate or succumb to an illness. Which I think is also a blessing.
How hard is it to put those spins on it though? I think because you say time helps you cope, time teaches you to cope, which I agree with, and I've been through a similar situation, so I can understand it firsthand, but that's all right. But how hard is it to put those positive spins on when deep down actually the predominant feeling is loss and grief?
I mean, it's hard, especially at the beginning, because at the beginning, it's like, you begin to resent certain things, like, resenting seeing your cousins with their mums, resenting even hearing your cousins call their mum in front of you, like, even, like, you begin to, like, these little things become extremely painful. Like, at the beginning, I don't even think that anyone would know that I was, going through that psychologically. But it's like even just hearing mum, like even hearing hearing someone refer to their mum as mum, or like my mum's calling me, or like it would kill something inside of me every single time. But like I said, time just teaches you how to cope. It's very hard, but what can you do? You have to go on. Like, you have to go on. And if anything, it's just taught me that our time on this earth is borrowed, and you just need to just keep going and make the most of it.
Yeah, you have to move forward, 100% agree, and you have moved forward, and like I said earlier, you're doing incredible things, which I wanted to go into. So obviously there's kind of like, from my perspective anyway, I'm sure there's a multitude of arms going on within your business and personal life and stuff like that, but the two prominent ones that I'm aware of is obviously Young Music Boss and Hot and Juicy Shrimp. So I wanted to go into the law side of things first, which I guess birthed Young Music Boss. How did you get into law and why?
So actually, I've always wanted to be a lawyer or an advocate in some capacity.
Really?
Because I feel like I did it. I've always been very vocal. I've always been very argumentative.
Okay.
I've always been very inquisitive. And I've always fought for the underdog. Always, like I always want to defend people, and especially when I see that they're being taken advantage of or they're being victimized. So I think that kind of and I'm not saying that I'm perfect and that I haven't victimized people in the past, or I haven't even maybe come across as a bully in the past. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I've kind of always had that desire to be a voice for people, and I've always had a really strong interest in human rights. I actually set out to become a human rights lawyer, and then I just became very interested in the penal system, especially like in the American penal system. I ended up actually working for the regional public defenders on capital cases in America, so I was literally working on death row cases. And but when I got to law school, it kind of took a different direction, because I have always been, I would say, like a humanist or humanitarian. I've always wanted to operate in that space, and it's something that I think will always be the case. And as I continue empowering myself and putting myself in positions of trying to put myself in positions of power, the goal is always to be able to be a more effective humanitarian. I've always been passionate about music. So when I got to law school, I started seeing a real angle of being able to, merge the two worlds, which is kind of like what has led me to that. But then also, like I said, I've always had really, really, really powerful women around me, like really powerful role models. Like all of my mum's sisters were in politics, like Minister of Justice, Minister of Education, like just running Tanzania. And that has always been a huge inspiration to me. Like I've always just thought that there's no ceiling. You know, like I want to be able to have an impact in whatever way I can do that. And I always felt that I could do that through law, I could do that through entrepreneurship and stuff, yeah.
Do you know what's so interesting about what you just said? Like the inspirations behind becoming a lawyer is you wanted to fight for the underdog and to help the people that were being victimised. And going back to your earlier story about growing up in the Netherlands, it's kind of like me linking those two things together and thinking how relevant is being the underdog in the Netherlands, being victimised, and you wanting to protect those people who are in obviously different but a similar situation. So, I mean, how linked do you think those two things are?
Yeah, no, definitely. They definitely are probably linked. Because, you know, like I said, I probably had moments where like I felt violated, but I wasn't able to express that or wasn't able to challenge that. I didn't have the tools to do that. So I think that is very much connected to that, you know, in some way, yeah.
It's interesting. I just wanted to point it out as the two things kind of as you were speaking. I was like, that definitely makes sense. So, yeah, it's good to go into it. I did want to talk about hot and juicy shrimp, but for different reasons for the heights that you've obviously achieved. So I was doing a bit of reading, as I said to you, and I read that when you moved premises, so you found a kitchen, I think it was in Bethnal Green, and you opened, everything's flying out the door, and 50% of the orders come back as complaints. So I wanted to ask you how you dealt with that situation and how you came out the other side.
50% is probably an understatement. I would say about 90%. It was just a disaster. I mean, it was just a complete disaster. I mean, me and my business partner the following day kind of like were just on the phone in silence, shell-shocked, probably thinking like, what the do we do right now? And then I was kind of like, well, we've put in way too much. Like at this stage, we have literally put in blood, sweat, and tears. Like, as in, I remember for a year, like almost a year, well, at least actually leading up to us opening a commercial kitchen, like I was working 7 days a week. Like, as in 7 days a week, every single day, like like for months, 7 days a week, like not one day off. Like, you know when people say, no days off, no, yeah, literally, yeah. Blood, sweat, and tears, and we were just kind of like, we can't give up. And then we sort of banged our heads together, and I was like, do you know what? Let's invite them all back. Every single customer that complained, let's invite them all back. Let's hold a focus group. Let's accept feedback. Let's ask them, you know, what we can change and what we can improve. Because what had happened was we have no experience in food, absolutely zero experience in the food industry. It's something that we sort of like fell into, and then it just grew legs of its own, and it became too big to sustain and to safely and legally continue to operate from our individual kitchens. And at this point, we had obviously decided to, you know, get the relevant licenses, get some qualifications behind us to have a better understanding of food practices, what the law is, etc. But with the lack of knowledge that we had, we didn't anticipate the changes that we would have to prepare for, going from, operating in our home kitchens, servicing 60 to 80 orders, to going to a commercial kitchen, servicing 300 orders, dealing with industrial equipment. We didn't anticipate having to adapt our recipe, having to adapt our cooking methods, having to adapt our temperatures and things like that. So obviously things went horribly wrong. It was a huge learning lesson, but I think because of how we handled that situation, and being able to accept customer feedback, being able to hold our hands up, and being able to face our ignorance, and face the lesson in it, is what allowed us to really turn that around. And some of those customers who had the worst complaints are now like our biggest ambassadors. Yeah.
It's a testament to your entrepreneurship and ability, to be honest, as I think a lot of people in that situation would just say, no, right, I've had enough, and throw the towel in. You said, though, in that explanation that you worked 7 days a week for months on end. And earlier, when we were talking about your mother, you said that she didn't get to see you have kids. How did working 7 days a week for months on end affect the relationship with your kids?
Oh no, I don't have kids yet.
Okay, so hypothetical.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how did it affect relationships in general?
I didn't have a relationship at the time. I wasn't in a relationship at the time.
Relationships.
So I don't really care about that too much. I feel like the right people just understand and support, and they appreciate when you are able to make that time. And I think that everyone and most people that I have around me understand that we are, we're building. I think we're all building. We're at this, pivotal stage in all of our lives. I feel like, your late 20s, which I'm in my late 20s, okay? And if you know me, mind your business. So I think it's that stage of like building, like you're going hard, you're hungry, you're doing everything you can to make sure that you set the right foundations for your life. And I think that the right people in your life will understand that, and they will fall into position. So I don't really care too much about who feels any kind of way about that.
Good answer. So to talk about the present, I wanted to understand like what consumes your main focus at the moment. You have all these different things going on. You said you came straight from work. So what are you focusing on within the present moment?
Just like building, like literally just building and setting the foundation, and like just building towards freedom. That's really what I'm building towards. Trying to create my definition of success, which is freedom. Yeah.
What's freedom to you?
Freedom is not being able, like no one else dictating your movement, no one else dictating where you allocate your time, no one else dictating what your financials are going to look like from month to month, and being able to just freely choose every moment of your life.
How in control of things do you feel right now?
Don't know if I could. Is that an essay question? I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can essay that. I can put a percentage to it.
Please.
I would say I'd feel about 60% in control.
60%. And how do you deal with the 40% of feeling lost?
Well, I wouldn't say that I feel lost in the 40%. I think the 40% kind of, because I'm very focused. I have a very, very clear vision of like exactly where I'm going to be this time next year, this time 5 years. Obviously, you can't always control all the different variables in your life. Anything can happen at any time. But I would say the 40% is not necessarily of me feeling lost. I think the 40% is being controlled. Right? So 60% is the control that I have, and 40% is being controlled. So I'm building towards eradicating that 40% so that I'm 100% in control, and that is the picture I have. It's freedom.
Moving forward, what do you want to accomplish in the future? And my question was kind of stemmed because obviously I was going through your Instagram and I noticed right at the top of your Instagram it says legacy in capital letters. What do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy is what I want my legacy to be is just the impact, how I was able to inspire other people in a positive way. I want people to I want to be able to be remembered. I want to be remembered like my mum. You know, my mum was like, first of all, there was hundreds of people at her wake, at her funeral for days. We in our culture, we hold wake for a number of days, and it was people from like everywhere, like from the top level of society to the impoverished level of society, and they all of them were like, my mum treated every single person the same. My mum treated every single person with kindness. My mum helped people where she could, inspired people where she could. She made people laugh. She uplifted people, and everyone was able to share a story about my mum of, you know, at many points in their life of how she made them feel, that how she made them feel good, how she made them feel seen, how she made them, feel supported. And that, I feel like that is a beautiful legacy to have. And of course, her children are her legacy as well. But to me, that comes down to impact. And just like the impact that you leave and that you have in people, that's why I want my legacy to be just a positive impact.
Talking about impact, that will probably be stemmed from what you plan to do and what you're able to do with Young Music Boss. So what's the plans there moving forward into the future?
So with Young Music Boss, it's obviously continuing to grow our network, and to like scale the extent of our events. So we have our signature event. We do a lot of different events, and we collaborate with a lot of different community partners, and to deliver the resources that we aim to deliver educational programs like across not just London but Tanzania as well. I've just launched a new platform in Tanzania as well, which is TESS. That is like a subsidiary of what I'm doing with Young Music Boss. But to really scale our events, so the main signature events that we have at the Music Intelligence Seminar, and really establishing that as like a multi-day like global conference that brings in delegates and speakers from around the world, and has a real impact, and then of course the Young Music Boss Awards, scaling that, and I feel like that's going to be the Brits of music business, and really raising the next generation of music executives.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the concept of the future? I mean, you seem like someone that would be filled with excitement, but I guess a lot of people sometimes they're apprehensive, but how do you feel about the concept of the future?
I mean, I feel like you plan for the future and you have a vision for the future, but I try not to dwell on the things that I can't control. I can only like apply myself as much as I can, and do the absolute best that I can, in order to maximize the things that are in my control. But ultimately, I can't really predict the future. I can say how I would like my future to look, but so I can't be controlled by the things that I can't control. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because within one of the articles that I was reading, someone asked you, what does the next 5 years look like? And you gave a one-word answer, which was greatness. So I was going to ask you, what does greatness look like?
I think that greatness is like a personal thing. Like for me, being great is, I associate that to success, and then I associate it to, when I think of success, I think of that legacy, I think of impact. Greatness, when I break it down, again, impact, and also achieving my goals and being able to realize my ambitions. And again, like freedom, right, is what I encompass in that word. Yeah,
it's really interesting. I wanted to ask you, and to be honest, this is before I knew anything about the situation with your mum, but from my perspective, and I was reading about it last night actually, and it was saying that when you kind of acknowledge the fact that you're not infinite, you are going to die one day, your focus becomes much more crystal clear, and you put so much more effort into what you do, because you understand that 50 years from now I'm not going to be here, so now's the time to work. So I wondered, kind of like the situation with your mum passing, how much more, I guess, focus that gave you to say, look, I'm not going to be here forever, and I need to do everything right now.
So yeah, I mean it does, because when I think about it, I actually think about it. It's like my mom, she was, like I said, she was perfectly healthy, and she was literally here in the morning, in the afternoon, like she's gone. Yeah, like she was not sick, she was not anything. And I just think that if I was to be dealt a similar fate as my mom, that means I've already lived the majority of my life. So I ain't got time to play. That means that I've literally, the majority of my life is done.
How much more time conscious does that make you in terms of prioritising your time on the right things? Because again, that's another thing that I was thinking about when I was reading that. It's like a lot of people will obviously try and come and consume your time, and if you're not actually conscious of the fact that, right, I've got a definite amount of time left, you can be quite blasé with giving it out to people who potentially don't deserve it. So once you've acknowledged that, how much more time conscious does that make you, and how do you prioritise your time?
It does make me very time conscious, but then at the same time I don't allow that to consume me to a place of anxiety, you know, keep living with a constant anxiety, whatever, because I feel like that also robs you of living in the present. So I just try and be focused, and I set a lot of short-term goals, and that's how I kind of like maneuver, I think, through life. And I think that having to manage like so many different things that are happening in my life, I've also become a lot more organized and a lot more structured, and everything else sits around that. I'm very selfish. I live my own life, and people who want to be a part of it need to get with the program. And but I feel like you do, like, you know, like people are like, oh, how do you do all of it? Like, how do you do like so many things? And I'm just like, when you're in it, you just do it. Like I feel like our mums were single mums, you know, single mums raising kids, going to uni, having a job, like they did it. It's just about structuring and organising your time. And I feel like when things are important, or people are important, or moments are important, you make time for it and you factor that into whatever your schedule is. I feel like Beyonce can make time for Jay-Z.
100% agree.
Yeah.
It's a great answer, and it feels like almost the perfect place to close out. So I want to say thank you for the insight, honestly, just for like almost being a spectator and listening to what you're saying. It's been really inspiring, so thank you.
Thank you. You're inspiring. What's your story? I've got one little question for you. So
one question,
what
okay.
inspired you to start this platform, and why are you doing this?
That's a good question. Well, I said to you earlier when you were talking about your mum that I went through a similar situation, and if I'm to give a completely transparent answer, which is what I pride the podcast of being about, transparency, I think when I went through a loss in my life, a big loss.
What was the loss?
It was my mum as well. But yeah, I was quite a lot younger, so I was 15 at the time, and rap music, it was like one of the only things that got me through it, to be honest with you, is I didn't talk to anyone, so the person that I was talking to essentially was the artist. So I mean, Jay-Z, Regrets, Tupac, Dear Mama, obviously, and songs like that, I think helped me get through quite a dark place. So when I was put on furlough from my most recent job, I've always wanted to do something to do with music. I was quite good at writing, so I started off doing the writing. My previous job was a sales role, so I was used to going and speaking to people and selling them products and essentially asking them questions. So then I thought, why don't I start the interviews? And we got into the interviews, and a bit like you, there's a much bigger picture behind doing what we're doing today, and this essentially is the exposure phase. Right. Get the business out there and then start to launch the other things.
I love it. I mean, I wish you all the best, and I know that it's gonna grow into like phenomenal heights. So I feel lucky to have been a part of the early years. You know, keep this footage.
100%.
So, yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Actually, I must ask you one last thing. We asked everyone to nominate someone, and as you're so well connected within the industry, I'm hoping this is going to be a great nomination. So, all of your industry contacts, who do you nominate to come on the podcast? Does it have to be industry,
or does it have to be someone really inspiring?
Industry would be great, but it's diverse in terms of it could be like a photographer, it could be like a lawyer, it could be a label owner, festival founder, artist,
I
Anyone?
think, okay, the person I was about to say, I realised that you've already had them on here. Industry, I'm trying to think. Okay, you've had that person as well. In terms, okay, I'll just go for someone who really inspires me in the industry. I think you need Shawnee.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you need Shawnee. So I nominate Shawnee.
Okay. Let's see if we can make it happen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.